hard to protect the minority, the opulent, against the majority, which is what government's all about. And he therefore designed a constitutional system which was intended to prevent that danger. The system, the way he set it up, he and the other framers, but it was virtually unanimous. There was virtually no disagreement about this. The one person who might have disagreed, Jefferson, was not part of any of this stuff. The constitutional system, as he designed it, was supposed to put power in the hands of the wealthy, who are the more capable set of men. I'm quoting. Power must reside in the hands of the wealthy, the more capable set of men, with the general population fragmented, factionalized, dispersed, in conflict, and so on and so forth. Well, this is like, we're now 1780s, okay? It's been a pretty stable system. And as it's been harder, the franchise has increased, so over time, more and more people did get the right to vote. And that just raised the danger. Furthermore, the power of the state to coerce by violence, and that includes the power of private power, like the power of, say, Carnegie to hire Pinkertons and so on. As that has declined, the need to resort to these other measures of factionalization, instilling hatred, marginalizing people, straight propaganda, and so on, that's increased, and very consciously. So by the time you get to the 1920s, where I started from, it's recognized that huge resources must go into the conscious manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses, and we have to regiment them, their minds, as well as an army regiments their bodies, and we have the methods for it, and those methods are advertising, entertainment, straight propaganda in the media, schools, so on and so forth. The 20s was an important period in this regard. It looks as if labor is under attack now, but remember, in the 20s it had been smashed. The major American historian, labor historian, David Montgomery, has a book which you probably know, or should if you don't, called The Fall of the House of Labor. Very, sort of standard, important book on the history of the labor movement. It ends in the 1920s, because that's when the House of Labor had fallen. After, with a lot of violence in that case, state violence, Wilson's Red Scare, the leading labor leader was in jail, Eugene Debs, where the New York Times had said years ago he ought to be sent, and so on. There'd been a big strike wave at the end of the First World War, smashed, labor movement destroyed, the whole thing wiped out. As Montgomery points out at the end of his book, labor had been virtually destroyed. Working people had to privatize their lives and aspirations. They sort of work out survival strategies for themselves, not with others, because the modes of cooperation and common struggle had been eliminated. And they did it, he ends up by saying, in a most undemocratic America, which is true. It was a highly undemocratic country, using a combination of modes of violence and coercion and repression and increasingly propaganda to prevent the dangers that Madison was worrying about, almost 200 years earlier, that more and more people would secretly sigh for a better access to life's blessings and might even do something about it if they had a functioning democracy, which therefore couldn't be permitted. I should just comment, in fairness to James Madison, that these remarks are not quite correct. The reason was that Madison was pre-capitalist. He's like just about everybody, Adam Smith, all the great figures from the Enlightenment, they're mostly pre-capitalist and very anti-capitalist in conception. You can't say they're anti-capitalist because there was no modern industrial capitalism around for them to have an opinion about. And this is a matter of interpretation, it's a matter of how you read text, so you can read them a lot of different ways. But the way I read them, they were very anti-capitalist. That includes Adam Smith. And I think you can demonstrate that. But certainly Madison was. He believed that when he put power in the hands of the wealthy class of men, the more capable set of men, the wealthy of the country, that they were going to be, as he put it, enlightened statesmen and benevolent philosophers who would devote themselves to the welfare of all. Okay, that's a very pre-capitalist conception. You know, that once you give power to the hands of the rich, they're just going to be benevolent philosophers, and they're going to devote themselves, you know, every minute of their day to the welfare of everyone else. I mean, it's like what corporate executives tell you now. They're sort of understand you have to say that, but by now, you know, nobody, I suppose, nobody believes it except the people who read these, you know, watch these movies, which show you how it works. In those days, Madison really believed it, and he very quickly discovered that it wasn't true. Within a few years, by I think 1792, he was already very upset about the fate of this democratic experiment, which he thought was failing. He condemned what he called the daring depravity of the times, as the business leaders who have now been given power use that power, he said, to become the tools and tyrants of government. They overwhelm government with their powers and combinations, and they're bribed by its largesses. And they're just serving self-interest, you know, not the interest of the general public. And he thought that was deplorable and so on, but that's because he began to, he perceived the way the system that he had designed was actually functioning. That description, you know, rhetoric is kind of nice, and people don't use fancy rhetoric like that today, but it's a perfect description of today. What's called the industrial capitalist system today is in fact one in which private power is the tool and tyrant of government, overwhelms it by its combinations, is bribed by its largesses. That's a pretty good description of 1997. With all the changes that have taken place since 1792, there's a good deal of stability to all this, including the commitment to the principle that the primary goal of government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. You read